Welcome to the Indie Fantasy Club, where we dive into the realms of self-published fantasy and celebrate the incredible worlds and characters created by indie authors. Today we're going to focus on names, or the characters. This is the beating heart of every fantasy story. From their dialogue to their development, let's break down what makes a character unforgettable. In this video, we are going to explore 5 key considerations that I look at when I'm reviewing character work in these indie stories, which includes personality, relationships, communication, conflict, and development. So by the end of this, hopefully you'll have a better idea of my preferences when it comes to character work for my indie rankings. Let's get into it. First up, let's talk about personality. A good character needs a strong foundation. Personality is just that spark that breathes life into your characters, turning them from just simple words on a page to someone that feels actually engaging and real, someone you can love or hate. It's not just about the actions they take. It's about how they think, react, and express themselves. A hero's courage, a villain's cunning, or even a side character's quirky humor. All of those things can leave a lasting impression that just makes readers want to spend more time in that world. But what makes a character personality memorable? For me, it's a balance between relatability and uniqueness. I think we're just naturally drawn to characters who feel real because they have the strengths that we admire, the flaws that we can understand even if we don't like them, and those quirks that kind of set them apart from a normal society. Whether it's a steadfast hero overcoming their fears or a villain with a tragic backstory, personality is what transforms a good character into a great character. Heroes and villains, I know I'm saying heroes and villains a lot, but those are like the two main protagonists and antagonists that are common in fantasy. So you might have morally gray characters, but for the sake of just personality, I'm just going to refer to them as heroes and villains. But on that note, heroes and villains that are just walking tropes are neither interesting or engaging to readers. You need to find a way to make these characters feel real. This is Teddy, by the way. Sometimes he doesn't like when I record videos, so he may interrupt me from time to time. But we love him anyway. So yes, heroes can be courageous and determined. But also, what if they were, I don't know, horribly depressed? Bring anyone to mind? Or how about a villain who thinks that they're the hero because of a misinterpreted prophecy? This juxtaposition gives depth and intrigue to an otherwise flat character. The second thing that I want to talk about that builds off of personality is relationships. Now that our characters have personality, we need to know how they interact with each other. Knowing the personality traits of your character allows you to have them interact organically based on their patterns of behavior. This is what creates that character-driven narrative. You throw your characters out there and you let them make the decisions, rather than you as an author interjecting yourself and forcing these characters to do things that they normally wouldn't do. These relationships add depth and realism to your characters. Is it a found family story where a band of misfits come together and become stronger? Or is it a dysfunctional family full of tension and betrayal and conflict? These relationships shape characters, which shows new sides of them and drives the plot forward. And these relationships also make the stakes of your story feel more personal. We feel more invested. Losing an ally or mending a broken bond can be as dramatic as any battle scene. Relationships are like the threads that weave characters into the fabric of the story. And it just adds depth and complexity to their progress throughout the story. A compelling relationship, whether it's one of love, friendship, rivalry, or betrayal, reveals new layers of a character and kind of just shows how they interact with the world around them. Speaking of relationships, this is Goose, this is Teddy. They don't like to be around each other, but they desperately want to be sitting near me. They are battling with that conflict of relationships, of annoyance with each other, but love for me. So right now, the love for me is superseding their annoyance with each other. Now, where was I? Anyway, these connections are what make the stakes feel personal, turning abstract goals into emotional battles. Different types of relationships can also determine the tones and themes of your story. Found family dynamics often bring warmth and hope, as these bands of misfits learn to trust and rely on each other. On the other hand, more toxic or dysfunctional relationships can really vamp up that tension and conflict, forcing these characters to confront hard truths about themselves and others. In either case, relationships are a mirror, reflecting a character's growth and giving the readers a glimpse into their most vulnerable moments. Third is communication. Relationships and communication go hand in hand. But if it's not done right, it can completely dismantle the first two foundational aspects of the character. And honestly, this category is probably the most important to my own ranking system. The dialogue is just one of those indicators where if it's bad, the book will usually end up as a DNF on my list. So let's talk about how you can create realistic communication between your characters. And in order for fantasy communication to be realistic, we have to take a peek into reality. Albert Mehrabian is a psychologist that came up with the 7-38-55 rule. So to put it simply, 55% of all communication is conveyed through body language, and another 38% comes from tone of voice. That means that only 7% of communication is the actual spoken words between people. Now, obviously, dialogue in a fantasy book is going to differ from reality. It's more smooth, and it gets rid of those uhs and ums and filler words and run-on sentences that just occur naturally when people speak to each other. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be following these realistic principles. So if you're using dialogue to communicate everything about your story, it's just going to take me out of the immersion of that experience. Now, dialogue is one of the most powerful tools that authors can use to really bring their characters to life. But it's not just about what they say. Sometimes it's about what they don't say, or it's about how they say something. Every word they speak should reveal something more about their personality, their background, and their motivations. And in fantasy, dialogue has the added challenge of immersing readers in a new world while still staying natural and engaging. For instance, a grizzled mercenary might speak in short, blunt, aggressive sentences, while a royal advisor is more likely to favor more flowery, formal speech. The way characters talk to each other, whether it's through banter, arguments, or even heartfelt confessions, it helps shape these relationships and drive that story forward, making dialogue a cornerstone of memorable character development. So always remember that what a character doesn't say can be just as impactful, if not more impactful, than what they do say. I cannot stress that enough. Sandan Glokta from the Joe Abercrombie First Law series, I think, is a really great example of this. Really all the characters from that series, but we'll just focus on Glokta. It's cool that we get to see inside of his thoughts as he's speaking with other people, because many times he seems very reasonable and polite with the words that he's speaking, while his thoughts are imagining ways that he can torture the person that he's communicating with. And that's why communication is one of the cruxes of your story. It will either take readers out of your world, or it will help them sink deeply into it. Number 4, conflict. Now, due to the fact that communication isn't always clear, there should be plenty of conflict between your characters. Think of conflict like an engine for any great story. It pushes characters to their limits and forces them to grow. It creates tension, it raises stakes, and it keeps readers invested in what's going to happen next. Now, conflict can take many forms, from epic battles against raging armies to the quiet internal struggles that shape a character's identity. A well-crafted conflict not only drives the plot, but it actually reveals those deeper layers of the character, showing who they really are when they're faced with these challenges and how they evolve to overcome them. There are two kinds of conflicts that your characters should be dealing with. The first is the external forces around your character. External conflicts are the visible challenges characters face in the world around them. Wars, rivalries, natural disasters, disease, quests. These obstacles are what test a character's resilience, strategy, and determination. To build strong characters through external conflict, you have to think of the stakes and the consequences. How they navigate these challenges, whether through courage, cunning, compromise, whatever it may be, that reveals to us as the readers their values, and that shapes the journey, which makes us root for the character's success and fear for their failure. The second type of conflict are the internal conflicts. These delve more into the character's psyche, exploring their doubts, their fears, desires, their moral dilemmas. Now, these struggles are often quieter, happening mostly inside of a character's head, but that doesn't make them any less powerful. And it just provides a emotional depth that those external conflicts can't always achieve. A mage who fears the destructive potential of their own power, for instance, might grapple with guilt and self-restraint, even as they try to save the world. To craft compelling characters, show how these internal conflicts are shaping their decisions, sometimes leading them astray or forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths. These moments of introspection are what make your characters relatable and human, even in the most fantastical settings. And conflict doesn't exist in isolation. It ties directly to a character's personality, relationships, and their communication. A bold, impulsive hero might approach conflict with brute force, while a calculating strategist might rely more heavily on manipulation or alliances or intelligence. And these relationships add complexity, as conflicts with friends or family can test loyalty and redefine bonds. And like I said, communication also plays a role in this, where misunderstandings or secrets can escalate conflicts and make things worse, which adds layers of tension. Those are the things that keep us turning the page. Together, these elements create a web of interactions that enrich the story, making conflicts feel personal, dynamic, and deeply rooted in the characters' identities. And that brings us to number 5, which is the character development. If the first 4 steps are done well, it should naturally leave room for progression with your characters. How do these people grow and change over the course of your story? Do they fall to their primal desires, or do they rise above their personal wants for the needs of the masses? And that's why character development is the backbone of a compelling story. It's what keeps readers invested in a character's journey. A well-developed character grows and changes in response to the challenges they face, making their journey feel more authentic and emotionally satisfying. Without growth, your characters are just going to feel flat or static, and your story will lose that emotional resonance with the reader. We just won't care because we won't see any development. Even if that development is regressive, that's still showing us that there's some change happening with the character. Readers just want to see your characters evolve in some way, whether it's through overcoming personal flaws, embracing new perspectives, or achieving long-sought goals. This growth not only adds depth to your narrative, but also reflects the complexities of real-life transformation. A character arc is the journey a character takes, not just through the plot, but through their own personal evolution. It charts how they start, what challenges or conflicts are shaping them, and who they become at the end of your story. A strong arc might see a reluctant hero grow into a confident leader, or a jaded villain redeem themselves through self-sacrifice. Even side characters can have meaningful character arcs, adding richness to your story's tapestry. Now, whether the arc is more subtle or more sweeping, it gives the reader a sense of progression and purpose, showing that the character's experiences have actually left a mark. Now, keep in mind that even though character development is essential to your story, it's still important to maintain a character's core traits so that they feel consistent. Their decisions have to make sense within their personality and relationships and communication. Growth doesn't mean a character abandons who they are. Rather, they adapt and expand on their existing qualities. Balancing that growth with consistency keeps your characters believable and relatable, ensuring that this evolution feels earned rather than forced by the plot. And it's really this balance that allows readers to connect with the characters throughout their journey, making every triumph and setback resonate more deeply. So there you have it. Now you know how I analyze characters for my indie rankings. Characters are what make us laugh, cry, and keep us turning the pages late into the night. They're the heart of every story. I love unique and immersive characters that make it feel like my little introverted self is making new, imaginary little friends out there. So if you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to check out my other videos describing my indie ranking process to get a better idea of how I approach world building, magic systems, plot, and my own personal preferences for what I enjoy in a fantasy story. Also, be sure to check out my reviews for popular indie authors to see how you might stack up as an aspiring author on my scale. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon to make sure you get notifications when the latest Indie Fantasy Club content drops. Let's build a community that champions indie authors together. I'll see you in the next video.